Good afternoon and welcome to our Wednesday webinar. Today's topic is Back to Basics, Formspace. So we're going to start with some basic functionality of our Formspace app. And I have with me on this call, well, first of all, I'm Paige Parker, and I have with me on this call Joel Atkins. So he's going to be answering some questions for you. You want to say hi, Joel?
Hi, Joel.
Yeah, very good. So we'll be doing our best to answer your questions. There may be times when we answer some of them out loud and other times where you'll get the questions in the box. And speaking of the box, in your panel on the right-hand side, you have a place for questions, and that's where we'd like for you to put your questions. Joel will be monitoring that, and he'll be responding while the webinar is going on. So just put your questions in there. We would ask that you keep the questions to today's topic because he's going to be answering questions from a bunch of people all at one time, fast and furiously, and won't have time to get into those specific issues or unrelated questions. If you have any specific issues or unrelated questions, we do welcome you to email training@eduphoria.net, and we will get back to you as soon as we can on those. So without further ado, let's jump into our agenda. Today, we're going to talk about Google Forms versus Formspace. We're going to talk about some vocabulary, documents, audiences, question types, sample forms, workflow, and community. So again, we're going to create a basic form today, starting from the beginning, and hopefully this will help you go back and figure out how to create the forms that you need for your district. The first thing I want to talk about is Google Forms versus Formspace, and I do love Google. We use Google in our company for lots of things, and I like Google Forms. They're quick and easy to set up. The thing about Formspace is that you're going to have the ability to create multiple types of documents, multiple types of forms, and also to have multiple workflows for each form. So when you want to route a form to multiple places, you can do that in Google, but as far as I'm concerned, you have to be practically a developer to write the scripts or get the scripts and the add-ons and everything that you need to make that happen, whereas in Formspace, it's built in. So not saying that Formspace is the tool for everything under the sun, but it is a great tool to address some of the needs that campuses have specifically, and also to get you paperless if you want to go through the processes of, from one spot to the next without having to do all the paper. Okay, let's talk about a little bit of the vocabulary. Which document type should I create? Well, there are two different kinds of documents that you can create with Formspace. Forms, obviously, because that's what it's named, and surveys. And they're similar, but different. And so it depends on what your need is. With forms, you can do data collection. You can do data collection with both forms and surveys. So you can get information in. You can also export the data from both. In forms, you can do a mail merge to another document. So I could collect form data and mail merge it with a Word document to send out letters to parents or whatever I needed to do. I can also get an Excel or a PDF version of my data from a form. In a survey, I can only get an Excel spreadsheet or a summary of the data. So I don't have the mail merge capability because I'm not connecting to specific users. I won't know who my users are. Another difference is in a form, the user goes and finds the form themselves. They go to Formspace, they go to the district folder or the school folder, they go to the department folder, and they find the form that they're looking for and they submit it. So in forms, you have registered Eduphoria users, and so they can log into Formspace and they can find the form. With surveys, you send them a link. So you can send it to only the people that you want to complete the survey, and they don't have to log in. They are not registered Eduphoria users necessarily. You can just send them a link. They can go in and complete the survey. That's why you don't have the same kind of data export, because you're not connecting to them in the same way. With a form, it knows who they are from their profile, and they're logged in when they go to that form. Also in a form, you can have multiple workflows with multiple steps. So a form can go from one person to another approval step, a notification step. You can have multiple steps in the workflow that the form navigates its way through before it's finally approved and whatever happens to that data in the end. In a survey, there is no workflow. You send out a link, you collect the data, and that's it. So it's one-way communication. And there are also fewer question types in surveys than there are in forms. So it's a little bit more limited, but that is in part because your users don't have to log in, don't have to have an Eduphoria account or connect to a profile in order to complete the survey. So those are the different types. And then there are also different audiences. So there are district forms and district surveys, and anybody with a Eduphoria account, which is potentially anyone from the district, but it can be limited by school in the workflow. So that's a district audience. You can have a school form or a school survey that is also, they have to have an Eduphoria School Objects account. It is limited to users at one school or one department based on their profile. And so not everybody in the district will even see that form or could even answer that survey. And then finally, you can have web forms and web surveys, and those are available to anyone. You can use that to survey parents and students or anyone else that you want to survey. You can put that information out there and anyone can respond. They have to have the link, but you can publish that link on your website, or you can embed the survey itself on your website. Okay, any questions about the different types or different audiences that you can address with Formspace?
So far, so good.
Okay, thank you. So we're also going to talk about some advanced features. We'll talk about how you can create workflows for your forms, and you can have multiple workflows for a single form. So I'm going to talk a little bit about district forms versus school forms and why you would use one over the other, and how workflows play into that conversation or that thought process. You can also break your forms into sections, and then those sections can be assigned to specific people. So I might have 10 questions that the end user or the requester answers, and then 2 questions that go to the first approver, 3 questions that go to the person after that. So you can break it into sections and you can assign those sections to different people in the process. And then we'll also talk about getting the data out. Formspace, like Google Forms, can generate a spreadsheet of your data that you can then use to do whatever you want to do. And then some additional options that we'll talk about today. I don't know if we'll have time to get to elections and management, but we will talk about the community for sure, because that's a great shortcut way for you to find your forms. Okay, before we get to that, I'm going to jump over to the actual application, and we'll start talking about Formspace here. I did have on my agenda one article that I wanted to mention, and it's in our help section. Let me back up here. And I just want to click on that to show you. I talked briefly about district documents and school documents and web documents, and this article kind of goes through that vocabulary just a little bit more and tells you who can create. So you have to have certain roles to be able to create district documents. You have to have certain roles to be able to create school documents. But you can also, and then there are different roles for web documents. So there's a little more information here if you want to go back to that later on. This is the same information that we just talked about on 2 of those slides, but it's in our help section under Formspace. And if you go to Formspace for managers, it's called Learn Formspace Technology. Okay, this is where I want to be.
Terminology.
What did I say?
Technology. It's okay.
Sorry.
But it's in the first section when you go into Formspace for managers.
Yes. Thank you. I
Yeah.
didn't even know I did that. Okay, so I'm logged in as an administrator, so I'm going to have the top level rights, and I'm going to go in and we're going to create a district form. So I'm going to click on Formspace, and if you have that role, then over on the left-hand side, you'll have the review, documents, reports, and manage tabs. The end user just has the my forms, possibly documents if your district has set anything up there, but they won't have review, they won't have reports, and they won't have manage. I'm going to go to manage because what I see, the default goes to my forms, and these are forms that I have submitted. Apparently, I have been the witness of many bullying incidents. That's just the form that I use a lot as an example. So these are forms that I have submitted, and I can always go in and look at the status of those forms. When I click on one that I submitted, I can see who's done stuff to it. Has it been approved? What's remaining. So right now, when I look at the history, nothing has happened and all of the steps are remaining. My building principal still needs to approve it, and then it goes to a paraprofessional who approves it, and then I get a notification. So I can always monitor the progress of any of the forms that I've submitted. I can see where it started and where it is in that process. But those are forms that I submitted, not forms that I created or that I manage. For those, I want to go to the Manage tab, which is down at the bottom. And when I go to the Manage tab, I'm going to see categories for all those things we just talked about: district forms, district surveys, district documents, school forms, school surveys, web forms, web surveys, personal surveys, and then elections, the community, and then management of the application itself. So I want to talk for just a minute about the district forms versus school forms. And I've said this about Workshop, and I'll say it about Formspace as well. There are times when you might want a school form, just like you might want a school course. But if you create a school form, it's not going to show up in the same spreadsheet of data with all the other school forms. So if there's a form that every school uses, rather than make, in my former district's case, for example, 42 versions and put them in the school forms, one for each campus, I would make one form in the district forms category, and then I would use the workflow to direct it to the school. So the workflow would make the difference about how it gets approved and all that kind of stuff. If I do that, if I have one district level form that each campus can access, and it's going to go to their campus people through the workflow and all of that, then all of my data is going to be in one spreadsheet. And so when I go to pull that together at the end of the year, it's all right there in my Excel spreadsheet that I can filter or do whatever I want to do with it. If I do them all as individual school forms, like I have all these individual school folders, and I make a form in there called Miss Punch, and I have that in each campus, so each campus can do it separately. At the end, if I'm trying to pull all of that information together for a district level report, then I'm going to have to combine all of those spreadsheets, or I'm going to have to import all of those spreadsheets into a database application so that I can do a query on multiple spreadsheets, something. I'm going to have to do some additional work to pull all of that together later on. Whereas if I do it as a district form that lists their campus, then Excel can filter that for me and I can pull my data all from one sheet. So for the majority of forms that every campus in the district uses, I would set those up as district forms and direct them to the specific campuses based on the workflow and the person's profile. The only thing I would put in school forms are forms that only that particular campus uses. So if you have a campus that has a program that no other campus in your district has, and they have some forms related to that program, then to me it would make sense to put that in school forms because they're the only ones that are ever going to be using it, and I'm not going to have to combine that with data from any other campus. But anything, even though we might have student council elections at every campus, I would still put that in district forms, and then I would let the campus information pull in the workflow part. Okay, so that being said, my example today is going to be to create a district form. So I'm in district forms. I'm going to say I want to create a new Formspace document. I'm going to tell it where it's going to go. And this is where I would select what kind of form or survey is it. I'm going to say it's a district form. I'm going to give it a title, and I'm just going to call it Formspace Test, because that's what we're doing today. We're just testing out some of the features. And then your district Formspace administrator, which might be you, has the ability to go in and create categories. And so you can put it in a category if you want to, or I can put it in general forms, which is where I'm going to put this one. But if you had an HR department that has a bunch of forms, you could file those away for them. I have curriculum technology and HR. You might have other categories that you wanted to create, depends on how you're going to use it. But I'm going to put it in general and then
And
say,
Paige,
yes,
I
sir.
was also going to say the title of the form is important too, because I've worked with a lot of districts where sometimes they'll put in the district initials in the form title, which is not really necessary because the form will reside in your district form. So
Exactly.
you want to
And
name the form something that's easy for the user to find.
absolutely. And along those same lines, and I'm glad you said that, is that the form itself does not need to have a year in the name. The data belongs to a specific year, but the document itself is just a template, and you can use it year after year. You'll just have a new set of data for the following year. So the title does not need to have a year, and it doesn't need to have your school initials. It just needs to be what the form is. Good point. Thank you. So down in the lower right-hand corner, I'm going to click on Create and Begin Editing. And so now you can see that it has put my form in the General Forms folder under the District Forms section. So it's alphabetized in there, but it put it where I said I wanted it to be. I can go in and write a description of the form if I want to, and I could also change my category here if I accidentally clicked on general forms and I really wanted it to be somewhere else. I can always go to the general tab of any form and I can change the category that it's in. What I can't do is move it from a school form to a district form on this tab. So if I had created it as a school form and now I wanted it to be district or vice versa, I have to recreate that form. There's not a way to do that, unfortunately. Okay, so what I have here on this screen is just some basic details. I have a save button and a delete button if I decide this is not what I needed to do. And then over on the right-hand side at the top, I have a preview button where I can see what my form is going to look like to the end user, because the form builder does look a little bit different than the way it shows up to your end users. So I can preview it there, and then I can publish it or I can put it in draft, active, or archive mode. So before anybody can see my form, I have to publish it, and that's going to make it active. And if I don't do that, then I'm not going to be able to do anything with my workflow, and nobody's going to be able to see my form. Okay, also up at the top of this screen, there are 5 tabs. We land on the General tab. I'm going to go first to the Questions tab, and this is where we're actually going to build the form. And then we'll talk about the other 3 tabs after we've done that. So it comes up with one, this is actually considered a question type. It's the, if I go up here and say I want to add a question, I have all of these different question types, title and picture, and that's the type of question that I have here. Whenever you give your form a name, it automatically generates a title and picture question type and puts it on the form for you so that the title you gave it is there. And over on the right-hand side, there's a little edit button where I could go in and add an image to this if I wanted to. So you could put your district seal or your mascot or something up there if you wanted to for that specific form. And then I can add additional questions that can be instruction blocks, list questions, text questions, whatever you want. We're going to look at examples of all of these, but right now I'm just going to say I want to do a text question and show you what it looks like to edit a question. So here I'm going to say last name. And what you put in that top line is what they will see above the box that they type in. you have the option of adding additional information. I'm hoping that last name is clear enough that they don't need additional information on this particular question. But sometimes for the question, you need to go in and add a prompt there so that they'll know exactly what you mean. And then I can say that I'm finished with that question. I always have the ability to go back and edit any of my questions because each individual question will have an edit button over here. So I can go back and I can say, I forgot to look at all my options. So let me see what they are. I can make this a required question if I want to, and I usually do. Most of the questions I would make required because there's certain information that you really need to have. And this is going to put a little red asterisk by the question so that people will know it's required. And if they're having trouble submitting the form, they'll know it's because they didn't do the required questions. I have the ability to give them more than one row. I don't think they need that for their name only, but if this was a different kind of text question and I wanted them to write a bunch of information, I can give them up to 10 lines of text to do that. And then I have the ability to make the width of the question different. So you can see here that all 100% goes all the way across. That is my width. By making it 50%, this text box is going to be about halfway across the page. I can change that if I want to, but I'm going to leave it as is and say I'm finished. And now you can see that little red asterisk shows up by the question so that I know that it's required, and my question box only goes halfway across the page. When I'm ready to do another question, I can edit this question and say I want to copy it. And I'm just going to copy it right below the other one. And now I'm going to edit the new question and just change the one word to be first name. Sometimes that's faster than doing a whole new question. When I did it this way, it saved the option of being required and it saved the option of being 50% width. So it's going to keep that formatting that I had on the previous question. So now I have two that are exactly alike. If I didn't want to keep that formatting, if I wanted to change it, it might be faster just to do a totally new question. Okay, I'm going to jump over to another form just to go through the question types and explain what they are, and then we'll come back and add a couple more questions to this particular form. So this is a form that I have set up that's just called question types because it is an example of all the types of questions. And you'll notice if I look in the upper right hand corner, it's in draft mode, which means nobody can see it but me. It's just there for my use. The same here with my reusable questions, which I'll show you in just a few minutes. I keep those in draft mode because they're just things that help me. So we talked about the title and picture question type. That's what it looks like. And I can come in here and edit that and upload a title picture if I want to. I have no idea if I have any pictures available. Let's see if I have an Eddie somewhere. No, I don't seem to have any images that I can pull up.
How about Eddie poses? Will that fit?
It's probably going to be a bunch of poses, but we'll see what it does.
Or Milo.
Yeah,
Do you have any Milo pictures?
I'm sure I have a Milo picture somewhere. It's a little scary though. When I type his name, it might show 1,000,000. You never know. Oh, let me do Milo.jpg. There we go. Okay, so I'll put him as the image. And for some reason, it's not liking them, and I don't know why. Maybe because it's resized it so small that it can't display. But that's how I would go in and add my image, and you'll see on certain forms we'll have an image over there that will show up. And then I'll say I'm finished with it. Oh, there, it put it in there. So there's Milo with the picture. It just didn't display it on that one screen. The second type of question that you can add is called an instruction block, and it's really not a question at all. It doesn't require any input from the requester. It's just a place where you can explain what the form is about, what they need to do, what's going to happen after they submit it. Whatever you need to tell them about the form, you can put here in this block, and they'll see that before they go in and do any answers. You can also put in a list question. A list question is going to list something from a drop-down box for them to choose. So it allows you to create that list and have them select from it. A list question is very valuable if you're asking people for input, because once you get it to the spreadsheet, if I typed Eddy Elementary and somebody else typed Eddy ELEM and somebody typed EES, then those are all three going to show up as different campuses when you do your searches in your spreadsheet. So to keep your data consistent, a list question will be helpful. Let them choose from the list so that they choose exactly the same name. A text question is great for short answers. They're good for putting names in or for giving any kind of information that you need to have. And like we saw a little while ago, you can select the width of the question. So it can go, it can be just a small box. If they just have to put a number in, just give them maybe 20% of the page, and that will give them plenty of room to put their number in. You can also do a date and time question, which when you create one will show you a calendar with the clock, and this looks very similar to what you see in other applications, that they can select the date and time of something specific. I have a date and time question in my bullying report form that we looked at a few minutes ago, so that they can say exactly what date and time the incident happened. I've also seen date and time questions used in forms to reserve a bus or a car or something else that they wanted to reserve. So you can use that question. It makes it really easy for them to put that answer in, and again, in the format that you want. A matrix question is where you can have columns and rows and rate something in your form. So in this case, I have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 as my rating system. 5, I'm assuming, is the best score. And then my rows are: the session was as advertised, it was helpful in my job, the instructor was knowledgeable, the instructor was prepared. So this is a question about professional development that I attended, and I would rate all 4 of those statements on a 2 to 5 scale, 5 being I agree the most, 2 being I don't really agree. So that type of question is called a matrix question, and you can use those however you want. This, where it says can be numbers or words, that's referring to this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I could put excellent, fair, poor, horrible if I wanted to for my ratings up at the top. You can write whatever you want there. You can also do a file upload question where you ask them to attach a file, and so they will see an upload file attachment button and they'll go out and find a file. You can specify which file types you will accept, and so it will have a statement that looks like this and says it will accept JPEG, PNG, or GIF. That's what this example shows, but you could require it to be a Word document or a PDF document or an Excel spreadsheet. You get to say what file extensions you want to accept. So this is just an example. This is not what you're limited to. And then the signature line question type. This one is a tricky one for me, because this is for if you're going to print out the form and then physically sign it and turn it in somewhere. To me, the biggest plus of Formspace is that I'm not gonna print out the form. I'm going to click submit, and it's going to go electronically to the person who needs to have it. So I would not want to use this kind of signature type, but you can, if you do create forms that have to be printed, you can put a physical signature block on there. The other option is to do an electronic signature. So it's not a question type. I put it on here, but it's not a question type exactly. If you enable electronic signatures for forms in general, then you can turn on the electronic signatures and have them click to sign rather than, and it's their login information that validate that signature. Kind of like in Strive, if your administrator has you sign an appraisal document, then it uses the electronic signatures built into our system. You can also have a budget list question type. This one I wish was named differently, because that kind of sounds like it's limited to just budget questions, and that's why it was created, but that's not all you can do with it. So you could list items and you can give them however many spaces you want them to have to list their items out, and then they have a place to put a number. It can be all kinds of number types. It can be currency, but it can also be whole numbers or decimals. So in this case, the example that I used is a number of books rather than the dollar amount that they need. They're just saying how many books they want to request. So it will give you a total. It'll sum up everything that they put into that form. So whoever it goes to will see what that total number is and what the number is of each title. So I use that as an example because it doesn't have to be dollars and cents. And then the last type is a document ID, which is going to assign a number to the form for tracking purposes. So when I go to look up the data in my spreadsheet, if I know what that form number was, I can find it that way. It gives me a searchable number. Okay, any questions about the questions? Questions about question types?
No questions about questions yet.
Okay, well then I'm going to go back to the form that we're building, and I'm going to go back into questions, and I'm going to show you a way that I can add some questions here. I can always go up and say I want to add a question, and I can select from any of those question types that we just saw, and I can add one of them in there. So I'm going to add a matrix question, and we'll come back to that later on. But I also want to go in and I'll add a question and show you how to move it. I want to go grab a question that I've already used. So my example, I'm going to go over to the settings tab and I'm going to say I want to import document questions. Like I said, I came from a district of 42 campuses, and when I had to make a list question where they got to choose their campus, that meant I had to type them all in an alphabetical order, 42 campuses. It was something I didn't like having to do all the time. So if I go to reusable questions, this is why I keep my reusable questions form open. I can go into it and I can see which questions I have in there. And I can say, I just want that school department question because it's already a list question. It already has all my school names in it. I want to import that into my form. So now when I go back to questions, there's my school department list question with all of my schools written out, ready to go. So I didn't have to type all those in again every time I build a form. So if you're the person who builds the forms, having some place where you can pull them in is helpful. Now I keep this one over here called reusable questions, but I could go in and say, I want to import, and I want to say from, I could say I want to import from my IMAP form, and I'll see all the questions that are there. My problem is I can never remember what kinds of questions are in what forms. So when I want that campus school department drop down, it's there, but I wouldn't have remembered that. So I'd probably have to look through several forms before I find it. For me, if I have that form set up with the ones that I reuse all the time in there, then when I want one, I know exactly where to find it. But you can import questions from any form that you have previously had set up. Okay, so that one's there. Now I do want to go in and make that one required. So I would come down and go to show options and click yes, I want it to be required. I can also set it to be horizontal or vertical. In a drop down, I usually want it to be vertical because it's drop down, and so that's going to help. You can also include an other at the bottom. This one is kind of a fake out. It looks like I have a blank at the bottom, but really that's waiting for me to put another option in. If I want to give them an option to type something, then I can say yes to the other option. And when I finish that, now as they scroll down, when they get to the bottom and they choose other, it's going to let them type in whatever they want. So I can do that with my list questions as well. Okay, so let's go back to, I added this matrix question in, and I'm going to say that for this one, we're going to do, this is going to be a professional development survey. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions there. In my columns, this is where I'm going to put the ratings. So I'm going to say excellent, good, fair, and poor. Now I have 4 here and I had 4 before, but I'm not limited to 4. I could always say I want another one and it'll give me more boxes. So you can have as many columns as you need to meet whatever rating system you're using. And then down at the matrix rows, these are the actual things I'm asking them to rate. So I would say knowledge of presenter, value of activities, comfort of facilities. Okay, so those are the 3 things I'm going to have them look at. And then again, I've got some options here. Do I want to make it required? And then do I display as radio buttons or check boxes? Radio buttons are like this yes, no here with the little circles that show a dot in there. Check boxes are just a box. I'll change it to check boxes so you can see what they're going to look like. And I will say I am finished. And so now you can see the check boxes where I would actually click and it would give me a check mark as opposed to a circle with a dot in it. So that's how I would build my form and get all of my questions set up the way that I want to. If I put my questions in or I forgot one and stuck it in at the end, kind of like I did here with school and department, I can make changes. So if I go up here to the top and click on Move Questions and Pages, I can say I want that question to go up above the survey, and I will save it. So now it moved that question up 1 spot. So I can't drag and drop them from here, but I can come up to the top and move pages that way. I also have the ability to create additional pages over here. So if this is going to be the first part of the form and the second part of the form is going to go to another person, I might want to create another page. And on page 2, I might want to add a different set of questions. So maybe I'm going to have an instruction block here that's going to say approvers will answer the next 2 questions. So that's my instructions to the people who see page 2. And then my next question would be text, and it's going to be describe the issue. And I might want to give them more than 1 line for that. Maybe I want to give them 3, and I'm going to make it all the way across the page since they're going to have to type something. And I will require it and say finished. And then they might have a third question that is a list question. And I'm going to say approve and deny are my 2 options. And I'm going to get rid of that one. Yes. And my question is going to say, do you approve of this activity? And it will also be required. And yeah, that's fine. So I'll say finished. And so this is what my page 2 looks like. Page 1 is what my original person who submits the form is going to put in. Now, they didn't actually ask for anything here, but we're going to pretend like they did. And page 2 is what the first approver gets. So you can break things into pages if that makes it clearer for you. I could have all of these questions on one page and just have them assigned to different people. It's really, the pages is really more of an aesthetic thing. If you like to have it on a separate page because it goes to a different person, you can do that. If you want to have all the questions on one page and the requester does the first 4 and the approver does the next 3, they can all be on the same page and that can still happen. Okay, so now I've created a form and I want to go to set up a workflow. I want to have a process for it. So I'm going to go in, and there's a default workflow there that I can go in and edit if I want to. One of the first things that I want to do is create sections. So I'm going to add a section in. This is one of the things that bothers me for no real good reason. For me, section 1 is this first section here. but I don't need to assign anything to section 1 because it's already assigned to the requester. I only need to assign stuff to people that are not the requester. So my section 1 really applies to my second person, not the requester. That's one of the things that kind of makes me crazy. So I'm going to say section 1 for all of these. I could say anyone, but usually the reason I set up those pages is I wanted to direct different people to different things. So I'm going to set up those sections and say okay. And then in order for that to happen, I don't know if you read that message, it was tiny, but it said in order for you to use those sections in the workflow, you have to publish that document. So I'm going to go ahead and publish it now so that I can do everything I want to do in my workflow. And it takes it just a second, and then it turns to green and says published. So I'm ready to go. So now I can go to the workflow itself. I'm going to open that up. And it opens in a different window, and I can set all of my limits here. I can say this is going to be my all schools workflow. So it's going to go to all the campuses. I can say all schools, and it's going to put everybody on this list in this one workflow. Or I might want to separate it and have one that's all schools and one that's departments or non-school groups. That might go through a different process. Or I might want to have one workflow that's elementary and one workflow that's secondary and one workflow that's everybody else, departments. You can have multiple workflows. So that's why it gives you the option of setting up a title there. In this case, I'm going to say, let's do elementary for this workflow. And I'm going to go in and click just my elementary schools. Y'all don't let me, if you see me missing one, Joel, jump in and tell me. All my colors. Okay, so those are just my elementary schools. That's what I want, and I'm going to save that. Yeah, I'm going to go in and do the approver next, so I'm going to leave that alone. So I'm going to go into the workflow, and this is where I'm going to create my process. So I would say I want to add a workflow step. Maybe my first step is going to be approval, and my first approver is going to be the building principal. So rather than go in and type all the names of all the principals from all the elementary schools, I can say I want to use a group, and I can scroll down in my list. Any of the groups that have a wrench on them are going to be system groups from the profile. So when I come down here and say principals, that's going to be everybody who has principal selected in their profile. The only problem with that group is this includes principals and assistant principals. So you might want to create your own custom group, which would be like these up here that don't say a specific, they don't have the wrench on them, they're not from the system, but I have created a specific group that's just my building principals. Those groups are created in the management app, not in Formspace itself, but Formspace can access them. So I created a group that has only building principals, no APs, and that's who I want to select here. And then because I don't want all the principals to get requests from all the schools, I only want them to see requests from their own people, I'm going to click this option over here that says limit to school. So my profile knows that I am the building principal at Aqua Elementary. Any user whose profile says that they're at Aqua Elementary, I will get those requests, but I won't get requests from any other elementary. The last thing that I need to do is come over here and say I am doing section 1 because I'm that first approver, and we put some approval questions in section 1. So I'm going to assign those questions, those 3 questions on page 2, get assigned to the building principal, limited by school. And then I'm going to come over here and save that. And there's step 1. That might be all I have to do in my process. Maybe the only thing I need is for the building principal to approve it, and then it's done and we're good. I still might want to have a notification step that says the requester will get an email, and I can say what I want that email to be. Your request has now been approved. And I'll fix my capital letter. Okay, so that's the message that they will get in an email when it's gone through that approval process. And I'm going to save that. So now my process has 2 steps. I want to talk about the third type of step. I don't necessarily need it here, but we have a step type called FreeFlow. And a FreeFlow step is sort of our answer to if-then logic. So we don't have a way for the forms to say, if I'm in the math department, send it to this person. If I'm in the science department, send it to that person. What I can do instead is create a free flow step, and I would pick a person. So I would go and find a specific individual, and this might be the front office secretary, or it might be the curriculum department secretary, and I would say they are going to be the first person who gets this form. So I would want to move them up to the top. And what will happen when Milo gets this form is he will decide who it needs to go to next, and he will manually enter the email address of the person it needs to go to. So since the software we don't have a way to set up if then in our software, you can make a free flow step, which is like a gatekeeper, someone who gets the form, reads it and decides who it needs to go to, enters their email address in. When they click on approve or deny, then there'll be a button that says go back to the workflow, and it's going to jump right down to that next person. So this gatekeeper will direct it to the right person, they'll answer, and then when they click on that button, it'll come back to whoever was next in the workflow. You may or may not need a workflow step, or a free flow step, but you do have that option. If I don't need a step, I can always delete it back out and have my process as it originally was. There are 2 buttons over here that I want to talk about very quickly. One is the verify workflow button, and to me this is really important. When I come over here, I see a bunch of red dashes, and what I should be seeing are green check marks. And this red X tells me no users can approve this step. So that means in step 1, which is my principals group, there is nobody in my building principals group from Aqua Elementary. If I go to the management app and fix my group, then all of these will turn green. So to me, it's really helpful to look at the verify workflow step and make sure that everything is green. And to show you that, I'm going to come back over here and edit that step. I'm going to, instead of using my building principals group, I'm going to use the system group that's all principals, still limited to school. Save it. Now, when somebody from Aqua Elementary puts in a request, that request is going to go to the principal and the APs. It's going to go to every principal at that campus. But when I go to verify my workflow, now I have all green check marks, because according to profiles, there are 3 people at Aqua Elementary, and I can go in and look at each one of the campuses and see who are the people who will receive this request when it goes to that campus. So that gives you a lot of information before you send it out, and before people start working on it, it's going to go, who it's going to go to, and it's going to work because you've looked for all your little check marks there. I
And
can also,
Paige,
yes, sir.
I was just going to say, it's the way to test a form. The old way was you would have to test the form
Mm-hmm.
by creating one and sending it to all those people and then asking them,
And
hey,
then
did you get
say,
that form?
yeah, hey,
But
did you
it's
get
just a
that? Did you
quick,
get that?
yeah, it's just a really good way to verify the workflow so you don't have to do that step of
Absolutely. And
testing it and then calling all those people to ask them, did you get my form?
It saves you a lot of trouble, and it also helps you to narrow down. When you think something's going to work, you click on verify workflow and you go to this particular campus and you see these are the people. Oh, well, that's not the right person. That's not how I wanted to set that up. So you can see the actual information of who it's going to go to. Also, if you had a form and something was wrong with the workflow, or you had all those red dashes and didn't know it, and so forms are like lost in the ether somewhere, once you've corrected your workflow, you can click this reprocess button and it will send all of those lost forms back through to that first step that you've now fixed, and so they should go through properly. So if you do create a form and you throw it out there too soon and people are saying, yeah, I submitted the form, my principal's not seeing it, I don't know where it is, come over here and look at the verify, get everything straightened out here, and then you can click that reprocess button and it will run them back through. And that's also a time saver. Okay, once I have my workflow created, I can close that down. And now, refresh for me. Okay. Don't be mean to me. Yeah, you went all the way back.
Firefox.
Yeah, I know, I do not like Firefox, and I've been fighting with it all day today. Okay, so now when I'm back in my form, I have a workflow that's titled elementary, and you can see that it goes to Aqua Elementary and 8 other schools. I could also say I want to add another workflow. Why did it let me pop up?
Click the top one. Yeah,
Okay, that's just weird though.
that's a
That it
Firefox
that it
thing.
did it that it did it now and didn't do it like 5 minutes ago. Okay, so this is going to be my secondary schools. So I'm just going to put secondary. I might need to do one for middle and one for high. It just depends. Maybe at the secondary level, they have an instructional coach that it needs to go through before it goes to the principal. So I would set up a different workflow for them and I would pick all of my secondary campuses. So I still have just one form, but I can have multiple workflows. All the elementaries can be routed one way, all the secondaries can be routed another way, all the departments can be routed a third way. So if they have different approval processes, you can have different workflows for them, but keep them in the same form. So I'm just going to say save on that one and close it. And you'll see that we have multiple workflows there. So I could have one for secondary, one for my departments. The benefit here is that even though it went through different processes to get approved, all of the data is in one place and I'm only having to create one form. So if the administration comes back later on next year, whenever, and they say, we need to add a question about, I only have to add that question to this one form and it applies to all of the campuses rather than having to go into every school form and make that change. So I guess my advice is think carefully about what can be a district form and then controlled by the workflows in terms of what's different between elementary and secondary, and what has to be a school form. Or it may be that you create a district form that's an elementary request and a district form that's a secondary request if they are so different that they can't, if the questions are different, then you could create 2 forms, but you wouldn't have to do one for each school. And then that helps you with the editing, and it also helps you with the data collection. Okay, any questions?
It's there on the screen. Someone had asked where to access the workflow sections
Okay,
in a
so
form.
if you want to create workflow sections, it's up on the workflow tab. You would click here to create them. So I created one called section 1 and I assigned it to those page 2 questions. I could create another one and I could maybe the first person is going to fill out those and then the second person is going to do the approval itself. So I could go in and make additional sections if I want to. The sections don't actually show on the page, they show here. So the sections are really tied to who's going to answer the questions. On the questions page, I set up pages, and I set up page 1 to be my requester and page 2 to be my first approver, so they kind of matched. Page 2 was section 1, page 1 was the requester. Like I said, that's just aesthetics. They could all be on one page and it would not matter. So I could come over here and say, I want to move this question up to page 1, and this question up to page 1, and this question up to page 1. And so now there's nothing on page 2, and I could just delete page 2. So now I just have one page, all my questions are there, but from here down, they have to be completed by that section 1 person. So you can't really see the sections on my page. The sections are assigned in the workflow process. So the requester would come in and fill out these 4. They wouldn't be able to click and type anything here. They would be grayed out for them. So they wouldn't be able to do those bottom questions.
Can you show that in the preview, how that looks?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure if it's going to be grayed out or not because it doesn't know who I am because I'm not filling out the form. Well,
Yeah, it
yeah,
kind of does. Yeah.
it kind of does. So you can't really do anything down here, whereas up here I can actually control the form. And down here, there's no place for me to put a response. So it doesn't really, I made it look like a section by putting that instruction block in. That's the only thing that distinguishes it from the rest of the questions, that and the fact that they can't answer those. Okay, we have just a couple minutes left, and I do want to talk about the community just a little bit. So I'm going to collapse my big folder of forms and come down here to the Eduphoria community. We have a community in a couple of our places. We have one in Strive where you can find templates, and we have one here in Formspace. So if you've been given the task of creating forms for your district, you might want to come here and look and see if somebody's already done part of the work for you. So maybe you have your finance department wants some forms created, and this is an activity fund requisition that they're going to fill out. If you come over here and look at that and say, that has almost everything I want, I need to change this part up a little bit, I may need a couple other things, but mostly this is what I want it to be, then you can click Import Document To, just like you can in Strive, and it's going to bring that into your system. So I'm going to say Import Document To. It's going to ask me where I want to put it. I want to put it in District Forms, and I want to put it in General for now, but I might create a financial folder and put it in there. So I could import that form, and now here it is in here for me. I can see the questions. I can edit the questions. If I come down to my list, here's my campuses or my different groups, I could edit that and make it be whatever I wanted it to be here. So I can make whatever changes I want to the form once it's in my system and then use it. That often saves you a lot of time creating forms that already exist out there. So the community is very helpful if you're looking for something specific. Or if you have, quite a few forms to create. And there are all kinds of forms: human resources forms, teacher forms, student forms. My bullying form came from one of the campus forms, I think. It came from one of these folders. So you can find all kinds of things out there. Some of you may have systems that do part of this. We didn't use it for absence of duty. We had another system for that. But if you don't, then there are several examples there of absence from duty forms. So lots of things that you may be able to use in your district that are out in the community ready for you to use.
Hey, Paige, we're getting questions about how to get data out of a form, like how to run a
Okay.
report.
Excellent question. I'm going to go to a specific form. I don't know how much data I have in any of these because this is my demo site, but I'm going to go into a form, and I would go to reports and say I want to do form analysis or survey analysis. Since this is a form, I'm going to come over here and say that's the one I want. and I can narrow it down. I can say I only want to see a specific school, or I want to put everybody in there because this is my district data that I'm getting out. I could narrow it down to specific questions if I want to, but then I'm going to come over here and say I want to print and I want to export to Excel. I can print a summary report, which will look like this example over here. It's just going to give me question by question what was the data I collected, and it'll show me a little pie chart that goes with that question. The pie chart's not always the best. It's a good visual, but it's not always the best way to compare. So you can go straight to Excel and get that data and do whatever you want to with it from Excel. Open, open, open. Okay, so it's going to download and open up in Excel. Stop bouncing and actually show me. Here it comes. So I don't actually have any data in that form, so it's just going to show me the headers that I have up there. These are all of my different questions, and if I make that bigger so it'll be readable, well, but the data would be here if I had any data in my form. So it's going to have the questions that were there in the form, and then it would list that information out there. You can download that information whenever you need to look at it, whenever you have questions about the data, but then I also would recommend that you download it at the end of the year. So you can go in and get that spreadsheet of at the end of this year, all of the 1920 data. I would get into one spreadsheet, and then I would come back over here to manage, and I would want to clear all the responses out of my form. So under manage, I'm going to go back to my form. I'll come back over and just do Boolean. And I would go to settings, and I would say I want to clear the document responses. I want to erase everything out. So I've taken all the data for the year and I've put it in a spreadsheet that is no longer part of Formspace. Now I'm going to erase everything, and now my template or my form is ready to accept data for the 2021 school year. So that would be sort of my closeout process at the end of the year. Export all the data into a spreadsheet, save it as my 1920 data, and then erase all my document responses so that I'm starting fresh for the new year. Okay, any other questions, Joel?
Nothing that can't be answered. I mean, there's a lot of very kind of technical questions that,
Okay.
and I just want to say this, like, for those of you that are watching, two things. One, the title of this one was Back to Basics, Formspace, so it really was like a very quick look at options in the system. And I'm sorry that we haven't had the time to go in depth on specific things, but we do have a lot of training materials online, and I know Paige is going to go over some of that in a second.
Absolutely.
And the second thing is, we get this question a lot. When you register to attend a webinar, you will automatically receive a link to the recorded webinar later this afternoon. So when this ends, it takes a moment for the video to process online and then the system to make the link. But by this afternoon, you will receive another email from GoToWebinar School Objects, and it's going to have the link to this very recorded webinar that you can view again.
Yes. And if you delete that thinking you don't need it anymore and you want to get back to it later, you can always go to training and webinars, which may be where you registered. Upcoming webinars is going to show you what we have coming soon. And then we have past webinars here. We have them broken down by Strive, Aware, Forethought, and everything else. So we're under miscellaneous. And this is where, up at the top here, is where the Formspace webinar will be sometime later on this afternoon once that video renders, like Joel said. So you can find them here. You can also get the email after you register. And then, as Joel mentioned, we do have resources out here. I'm going to go to Formspace. I couldn't find it. Under Formspace, we have a section for Formspace managers, for end users, and then some of that more specific questions, the more technical questions, is going to be here under building forms. This is where you'll find stuff about workflows, about form sections, all of that kind of stuff. So again, this one was just a basic one. We mostly went over creating and setting one up and what an end user would see, but you do have that other information out on our website as well. And then I also wanted to mention that we have two types of events going on right now. We have our ESC user conferences, which we've done for several years in partnership with the service centers, and they are valuable training, but they're more of a networking opportunity. They're 45-minute sessions. They're more of a show and tell of best practices. Whereas we have a new event this year called the Training Roadshow that is a more in-depth training. It's 3.5-hour sessions. You can take up to 2 a day, and they are 2-day events. So you could, in theory, be trained on 4 different applications or 4 different topics in the 2-day roadshow event. So they're both valuable. They're both great. The ESC conferences are free. There is a charge for the Training Roadshow. It's a small charge considering the amount of time and training that you get, but those are sort of the comparisons. So the fall Training Roadshow events that we have going on, we're starting Houston next Monday and Tuesday, and then we'll be in New Braunfels in early November, Corpus the week after that. We've already done Lubbock and DFW and Tyler, and we also will be rescheduling an El Paso event at some time later on in the year. And then we also have several ESC conferences going on. The next one is going to be Huntsville, which is next Tuesday. And then
Actually,
Houston.
it's Abilene tomorrow that I'm
Oh,
about
that's
to
right.
drive to. As soon
Yeah,
as
I'm
this is
sorry.
over, I'm driving to Abilene.
So I almost missed your Abilene conference. So Abilene is tomorrow. If you're close to there, you can get there fast. And like I said, it's free, so that shouldn't be a problem. And then Huntsville on the 15th, Houston on the 16th. So if you're close to one of these service centers, these events are coming up, and you can go to eduphoria.net/events to register for that. Or you can go to eduphoria.net/training-roadshow if you want to sign up for one of the paid hands-on training experiences. And then we also have other training that we offer all the time. You can schedule a trainer to come to your district if you need on-site training. You can schedule a personalized webinar if you need to not have somebody come in person, but to have something that's just you and a trainer, just your district and a trainer. Or we have all of our on-demand information in our online help. We have our articles, we have videos, we have a YouTube channel. So you can find lots of information in our online help, which is, you can click on the question mark in any application to get to that. And then we do have upcoming webinars. Well, I didn't change the slide, so today is on there. Sorry, my bad. And then we have Back to Basics, facilities and events coming up next week. And then we have New Stuff and Aware is going to be rescheduled. I'm not sure what the date is going to be there. And then we have our Halloween tricks and treats. We're going to show you a little bit of everything from all of our applications, just some things that hopefully will make life easier for you.
Shortcuts and things.
Shortcuts, yeah. Absolutely. But we will get those changes posted out here, and you can go to training and webinars upcoming, and we'll get the this one will be moved, and then the New Stuff and Aware will be moved when it gets assigned to a new day. So you can find all of our upcoming webinars here all the way through December so far. And then,
good job.
I told you I was going to do that wrong every time. Lastly, just stay connected to us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. You can get all kinds of information. And if you want to get our email updates, go to eduphoria.net/news, and there's a form where you can register to receive emails. And those emails will tell you when we have webinars going on or any other events. Any final questions?
I am looking. I don't see anything. For those of you that had like particular instances or an issue, please reach out to us through email. You can contact us at training@eduphoria.net. And then someone else had a question that I routed them to support
Okay.
at eduphoria.net.
Support is more for the things are broken or not working correctly, but if it's a how-to question, training at eduphoria.net is your best resource, and we look forward to talking to you there, and we thank you for joining us today.
Have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Absolutely, and safe travels to Joel.
Thank you.